rain hammered against the mansion's windows like 1,000 angry fists as Elena Voss stared at the divorce papers bleeding ink across the mahogany table. Across from her sat Dante Moretti, the Mafia boss whose whisper could end lives, whose empire ruled the city's shadows. Beside him, his mother Serafina smiled like a serpent finally cornering its prey. They thought divorce would erase her, reduce her to nothing. It was the most emotion he'd shown all evening. No? No. Elena reached for the pen that sat beside the papers. Mont Blanc, 18-karat gold, a wedding gift from Serafina that had always felt more like a reminder of obligation than generosity. I'll sign. Serafina's laugh was quick and sharp. Well, that's the first intelligent thing you've done in 3 years. I told Dante from the beginning you weren't suited for this family. Too soft, too ordinary. A waitress. She said the word like it was a disease. As if serving tables qualified you to sit at ours. Elena had been a waitress when she met Dante. 25 years old, working double shifts at an upscale restaurant in the financial district, saving every penny for a life that felt impossibly far away. He'd come in one night with business associates, commanded the room without saying a word, and when he'd asked for her number, she'd thought it was a joke. Men like Dante Moretti didn't notice women like her. But he had noticed. He'd courted her with the kind of intensity that felt like being caught in a riptide. Flowers that cost more than her rent, dinners in restaurants she'd only read about, weekend trips to Paris just because he wanted to see her face when she saw the Eiffel Tower for the first time. He'd made her feel like the center of the universe, like nothing mattered except her happiness, like love could actually exist in the shadow of his dangerous world. She'd been so stupid. The restaurant where I worked, Elena said, not looking up from the papers, had a saying, everyone comes in hungry for something. Your job is to figure out what they really want to eat. I thought I understood what you wanted, Dante. What I wanted, Dante said, leaning back in his chair with the casual arrogance of a king on a throne, was a wife. Someone to stand beside me at events, look beautiful in photographs, and provide heirs to continue the Moretti name. You failed at 2 out of 3. The words hit like bullets, but Elena's hand didn't shake as she picked up the pen. No children in 3 years, Serafina's voice dripped with accusation. Do you know what the family has endured? The whispers, the speculation? People wondering if the great Dante Moretti has been cursed, if his bloodline will die with him. All because you couldn't perform the one duty that mattered. Elena had spent 2 years in fertility clinics, enduring tests and treatments and procedures that left her feeling like a broken machine. The doctors had found nothing wrong with her, nothing wrong with Dante, just one of those inexplicable failures that sometimes happened. But in Serafina's world, there was no such thing as chance. There was only blame, and it always landed on the woman. I'm sorry I couldn't give you what you wanted, Elena said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. Not because she owed them anything, but because there had been a time when she genuinely wanted a child with Dante. When she'd imagined a little girl with his dark hair and her smile, a little boy with his strength and her kindness. When she'd thought love might be enough to build a family on. Sorry doesn't change anything. Dante stood, buttoning his suit jacket, custom-made Italian, probably worth more than most cars. Sign the papers, Elena. It's time for both of us to move on. To the model? The words were out before Elena could stop them. Dante's jaw tightened. Careful. Why? What are you going to do, divorce me? Elena felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been building for months. You're already doing that. You've been doing that for a year, piece by piece. Every time you came home late, every time you took a call in another room, every time you looked at me like I was furniture you'd grown tired of. Don't be dramatic, Serafina snapped. You knew what this marriage was. You knew what this family required. If you couldn't meet those requirements, then this is the natural conclusion. Natural. Elena tasted the word like poison. There's nothing natural about this. This is murder, Serafina. You're just doing it slowly, with lawyers and prenups instead of bullets. If you're expecting sympathy, I'm not expecting anything. Elena pulled the papers toward her, scanning the lines of legal text that all added up to the same thing. Erasure. I stopped expecting anything from this family 6 months ago. Dante walked to the bar cart, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey that probably cost more than Elena's first car. Then we understand each other. You'll sign, leave quietly, and we'll all move forward. My lawyers will ensure you're escorted from the property with your personal belongings. Nothing that belongs to the family leaves this house. My clothes were purchased with Moretti money. The jewelry, the handbags, the shoes, all of it stays. You can take what you brought into this marriage, which I believe amounts to 2 suitcases of clothes that are 3 years out of date. Elena had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so plainly still felt like being slapped. 3 years of her life reduced to 2 suitcases. The car is registered in my name, as is your phone, your laptop, and the credit cards you've been using. All of it will be deactivated tonight. Dante took a slow sip of whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. I'm not a cruel man, Elena. I'll have my driver take you wherever you want to go. A hotel, a friend's apartment, a homeless shelter if it comes to that. But after tonight, you're on your own. Thunder cracked so loud the windows rattled. Elena looked down at the papers, at the signature line that waited for her name. Once she signed, Elena Moretti would cease to exist. She would go back to being Elena Voss, the waitress from nowhere, the woman who'd had a fairy tale for 3 years before reality came calling. I need a pen, she said quietly. Serafina's smile was triumphant. It's right there, dear, the one I gave you on your wedding day. How fitting that you use it to end what should never have begun. Elena picked up the pen, felt its weight in her hand. 18-karat gold. A gift from a woman who'd hated her from the moment Dante brought her home, who'd spent 3 years making sure Elena knew she didn't belong, would never belong, could never be worthy of the Moretti name. Before I sign, Elena said, I want to say something. Dante sighed. Elena, just one thing. Then I'll sign, and you'll never have to hear my voice again. Elena looked up, met his eyes directly for the first time all evening. When you proposed, you told me a story about your father. Do you remember? Dante's expression flickered. I don't see how that's relevant. You said he taught you that power comes from knowing what people want, not what they say they want, but what they really want. The hunger underneath. Elena kept her voice steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. You said that's how he built this empire, by understanding desire. And? Serafina moved closer, her presence like a cold front. What's your point? My point is that Dante learned the lesson, but he didn't learn it completely. Elena turned the pen in her fingers, watching the light catch the gold. He learned to see what people want. He never learned to see what people are. Philosophical nonsense, Serafina scoffed. Sign the papers, girl. But Elena wasn't looking at Serafina anymore. She was looking at Dante, and something in her gaze made him set down his glass. You saw a waitress, Elena said softly. Someone hungry for a better life, for security, for love. You saw someone you could give things to, someone who would be grateful, who would be shaped by your generosity into exactly what you needed. And you were right. I was hungry. I did want those things. But you never asked why I was working in that restaurant. You never asked where I came from. You never asked who I was before you decided who I should be. It doesn't matter who you were. Dante's voice had an edge now. It only matters who you failed to become. You're right. Elena placed the pen on the signature line. It doesn't matter who I was, but it will matter who I am after this. She signed her name in one smooth motion. Elena Voss, not Moretti. Voss. The name she was born with, the name she should never have given up. Serafina exhaled, the sound of victory. Finally, some sense. Elena stood, setting the pen down carefully beside the signed papers. I'll need a few hours to pack. You have 1 hour, Dante said, already turning back to his desk, already dismissing her. Marco will drive you. He'll wait in the car while you pack, then take you wherever you want to go. I suggest you think carefully about where that is. Elena nodded, started toward the door. Oh, and Elena? Serafina's voice stopped her at the threshold. If you're thinking about going to the press with some tragic story about the heartless Morettis, I'd reconsider. We have lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. And you signed an NDA along with those divorce papers. One word to the wrong person, and you'll spend the rest of your life paying off legal fees. Are we clear? Crystal, Elena said without turning around. She walked out of Dante's study, down the marble hallway lined with art that cost more than most people would see in a lifetime, past the grand staircase where she'd descended on her wedding day in a dress that weighed almost as much as she did. The house was silent except for the storm, the staff having been dismissed for the evening because Serafina insisted family business should be private. Elena climbed the stairs to the bedroom she'd shared with Dante, though shared had become a generous word in recent months. He'd been sleeping in his study most nights, claiming work kept him up late, and she'd stopped pretending to believe him. The bedroom was exactly as she'd left it this morning, bed perfectly made by the housekeeper, her perfume bottles arranged just so on the vanity, the book she'd been reading on the nightstand. It looked like a room from a magazine spread, How the Other Half Lives. It had never felt like home. Elena pulled 2 suitcases from the closet, the same ones she'd brought 3 years ago, battered leather that had belonged to her mother. She'd kept them in the back, hidden behind the Louis Vuitton and Hermes that Dante's stylist had insisted she needed. Now she pulled them out and began the strange arithmetic of deciding what parts of your life you could carry. The clothes Dante had bought her stayed in the closet. The jewelry went back in the safe. The shoes, the handbags, the designer sunglasses, all of it remained. She took only what she'd brought: jeans worn soft with age, sweaters that had belonged to her mother, a leather jacket she'd saved for 6 months to buy when she was 22. Things that remembered who she was before Dante Moretti decided to reinvent her. The rain lashed against the windows as she packed, and Elena found herself moving faster, as if the storm was counting down to something. She grabbed her mother's pearl necklace, the only piece of jewelry that was truly hers, a photo album from before her marriage, a few books. Then she stopped in front of the closet one more time, pushed aside the expensive clothes, and found what she was looking for in the very back. A small wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, locked with a combination only she knew. Elena hadn't opened it in 3 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she spun the numbers, 71319, and heard the lock click. Inside, wrapped in silk, a phone she'd never used, a passport that didn't say Moretti, and a business card so old the edges had started to yellow. On the card, in elegant script, Ashcroft Holdings, London, Paris, New York. And at the bottom, a phone number she'd memorized but never called. Elena pulled out the phone, checked the battery, dead, of course, and found the charger she'd kept hidden in the bottom of the box. She plugged it in, watching the screen slowly come to life. Downstairs she heard Dante's voice, then Serafina's laughter. They were probably celebrating already, planning his next move, his next marriage, his next attempt to secure the heir his mother demanded. The phone buzzed as messages began downloading. 3 years of messages, all from the same number, all saying variations of the same thing. When you're ready, we're here. The door is always open. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Elena scrolled through them. Years of messages she'd been too proud to read, too convinced that she could make her marriage work, too determined to prove she didn't need the family she'd walked away from. Her finger hovered over the number. 1 call. That's all it would take. But pride was a funny thing. It kept you warm right up until the moment it froze you to death. Elena looked around the bedroom one last time, at the silk sheets and the crystal chandelier and the view of the city that had never quite felt like hers to claim. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. It rang once. Elena! The voice on the other end was exactly as she remembered it, warm like aged whiskey, strong like iron, with an accent that spoke of old money and older power. It's been a long time, my dear. Hello, grandfather, Elena said, and felt something break open in her chest that had nothing to do with divorce papers. I'm ready to come home. There was a pause, the sound of a man who'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years, trying to control his emotion. Are you safe? For now. But I need to leave. Tonight. Where are you? Still at the Moretti mansion. They've given me an hour to pack and leave. Her grandfather's laugh was soft and dangerous. An hour. How generous. Tell me, did they offer you a settlement? Nothing. The prenup covered that. I see. And did they explain what happens now? Where you'll go? How you'll live? They assume I'll struggle. Serafina suggested a homeless shelter. The silence on the other end was the kind that preceded thunderstorms. When her grandfather spoke again, his voice was perfectly controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Elena. Take only what's yours. Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking you need anything that bears their name. And then I want you to go outside to the front gate. Why? Because in exactly 45 minutes, a car will arrive for you. Not the Moretti driver, my driver. And he will take you to the airport where a plane is waiting. Grandfather, you don't have to... I have waited 3 years for this phone call. 3 years watching my only granddaughter make herself smaller for a man who didn't deserve her shadow. I will not wait another minute. His voice softened. It's time to come home, Elena. Time to remember who you are. Elena closed her eyes, felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally break free. I don't know if I remember anymore. Then we'll remind you. We'll show you everything you walked away from, everything you tried to pretend didn't exist because you thought love required sacrifice. And then, my dear girl, we're going to show the Morettis exactly what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. I don't want revenge. I know, that's why you'll be so good at it. There was a smile in his voice now. 45 minutes, Elena. Front gate. Can you do that? Elena looked at the 2 suitcases, at the wooden box, at the phone that still had messages downloading. Yes. Good girl. And Elena, when you walk out of that house tonight, don't look back. Never give them the satisfaction of thinking you'll miss what they took from you. Walk out like a queen, leaving a kingdom that no longer deserves her presence. I'm not a queen, grandfather. Not yet, he agreed, but you were born to be one. It's time the world remembered that. He hung up, and Elena stood in the silence, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not healing, that would take time, but straightening, strengthening, like a spine that had been bent finally remembering how to stand straight. She finished packing quickly, efficiently, taking only what mattered. Then she changed out of the designer dress she'd worn for the divorce meeting and into jeans and her mother's leather jacket. Armor that remembered who she'd been before Dante had tried to remake her into his perfect wife. 45 minutes later, Elena stood at the front door with her 2 suitcases. Marco was waiting by the car, an umbrella in hand, looking confused when Elena shook her head. I won't need the car, Marco, thank you. But Mr. Moretti said... Tell Mr. Moretti that plans have changed. Tell him... Elena paused, thinking. Tell him thank you for the 3 years. And tell him I hope he finds what he's looking for. Marco looked even more confused, but he nodded, went back inside to deliver the message. Elena walked down the long driveway in the rain, pulling her suitcases behind her, feeling the storm soak through her jacket, her hair, her skin. The gates loomed ahead. Tall iron things with the Moretti crest worked into the metal, a lion and a snake circling each other for eternity. She'd always hated those gates. Behind her she heard the front door open, heard Dante's voice calling her name with what might have been confusion or might have been anger. Elena didn't turn around, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her face one more time. She reached the gates just as headlights appeared through the rain. The car that pulled up wasn't just expensive, it was the kind of vehicle that made other expensive cars look cheap. Black, sleek, with windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside, and a hood ornament that caught the light like a small piece of captured starlight. The driver's door opened, and a man in a perfect suit emerged with an umbrella, moving with the kind of precision that suggested military training. Miss Ashcroft? Not Moretti. Not Voss. Ashcroft. Yes, Elena said, and the word felt like putting on armor. I'm James. Your grandfather sent me. He took her suitcases like they weighed nothing, loaded them into the trunk with the same careful precision he'd used to approach. Then he opened the back door, held the umbrella over her. Welcome home, miss. Elena slid into the car, into leather that smelled like money and power and belonging. And as James closed the door behind her, she looked back one time. Dante stood in the doorway of the mansion, backlit by the warm glow of the house, Serafina beside him. They looked like a painting, the Mafia king and his mother surveying their kingdom. Elena wondered if they felt victorious. She wondered if they understood what they'd just set in motion. The car pulled away and Elena watched the Moretti mansion disappear into the rain and darkness, taking with it 3 years of her life that she would never get back. But as the car turned onto the main road, heading toward the airport, toward the private jet her grandfather had sent, toward a future she'd tried so hard to leave behind, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. And in the darkness of the car, With rain hammering on the roof and the city lights blurring past the windows, Elena Ashcroft, not Moretti, not Voss, but Ashcroft, allowed herself to smile. Because Dante had taught her something valuable tonight. He'd taught her that the biggest mistake you could make in this world wasn't underestimating your enemies. It was underestimating the people you'd already beaten. And Elena was done being beaten. The private jet cut through the darkness like a knife through silk, leaving the storm-battered city behind. Elena sat in cream leather seats that probably cost more than her entire year's salary as a waitress, watching rain streak across the windows as they climbed toward clearer skies. Across from her, James had placed a silver tray with tea, sandwiches, and fresh fruit, as if she'd just returned from a vacation instead of fleeing a marriage that had slowly strangled her into silence. She hadn't touched any of it. The phone in her hand buzzed, another message from a number she didn't recognize. "We heard what happened. If you need anything," Elena deleted it without reading the rest. Word traveled fast in Dante's world. By morning, everyone would know. The great Dante Moretti had finally cut loose his disappointing wife, the waitress who couldn't even manage to produce an heir. They'd whisper about it over expensive lunches, shake their heads with practiced sympathy that barely concealed their satisfaction at watching someone fall. Let them whisper. "Miss Ashcroft?" James appeared from the front cabin, moving with that military precision that seemed to define everything about him. "We'll be landing in approximately 45 minutes. Your grandfather asked me to give you this." He handed her a tablet, the screen already glowing with a video call waiting to connect. Elena's finger hovered over the accept button, suddenly uncertain. 3 years. She'd walked away from her family 3 years ago, convinced that love meant choosing between two worlds, convinced that Dante needed all of her or none of her. She'd chosen him. She'd chosen wrong. She tapped the screen. Her grandfather's face appeared, older than she remembered, but with those same sharp blue eyes that seemed to see through walls, through lies, through the careful masks people wore. Alexander Ashcroft, patriarch of an empire that spanned 3 continents, looking at her through a screen with an expression that made her throat tight. "Elena." His voice was exactly as it had been on the phone, warm, strong, controlled. "You look tired." "I look like I've been crying in the rain for an hour," Elena said, and was surprised to hear herself almost laugh. "Let's not pretty it up." "Fair enough." A smile ghosted across his face. "James is taking good care of you?" "He brought me tea I can't drink and sandwiches I can't eat, so yes. The nausea will pass. It always does when you leave something poisonous behind." Alexander leaned back in what looked like his study. She could see the familiar bookshelves behind him, the painting of her grandmother that he'd never taken down even though she'd been gone for 10 years. "I want you to understand something before we land. When you walk off that plane, things will change very quickly. The world you left behind doesn't just welcome people back, it reclaims them." "I don't want to be reclaimed," Elena said quietly. "I just want to disappear for a while." "Disappearing is for people who have something to hide. You have nothing to be ashamed of." His voice hardened. "They should be ashamed. A man who throws away his wife like yesterday's newspaper, a mother who treats her daughter-in-law like a servant, those are the people who should want to disappear. Grandfather, I know. You don't want revenge. You told me." He studied her through the screen. "But I didn't build what I built by letting people hurt my family without consequences. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you love him? Dante Moretti. Do you still love him?" Elena looked out the window at the clouds they were cutting through, silver-edged and endless. Did she love him? She'd loved who she thought he was. She'd loved the man who'd brought her coffee in bed, who'd danced with her in empty restaurants, who'd promised her the world and then slowly taken it back piece by piece when she failed to meet his mother's impossible standards. "No," she said finally, "I don't think I do anymore. I think I loved a story I told myself about who he could be." "Good." Alexander's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Then you won't object to what happens next." "What happens next?" "You come home. You rest. You remember who you are. And then, in 3 weeks, you attend the Castellani Gala with me." Elena's stomach dropped. The Castellane Gala was the social event of the year, where old money met new power, where deals were made over champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month, where being seen meant you mattered, and not being invited meant you'd already been forgotten. "The Morettis will be there," she said. "I'm counting on it." Alexander leaned forward. "Dante is trying to broker an alliance with the Vasquez family. Antonio Vasquez has shipping routes Dante needs, and Dante has political connections Antonio wants. They'll announce the partnership at the gala. It's supposed to be Dante's moment of triumph, expanding his empire, cementing his power base. Then why would I want to be there to watch it? Because, my dear granddaughter, the Vasquez alliance is built on a foundation of lies and debt that's about to crumble. And your family, your real family, holds the financial leverage that could either save that alliance or destroy it completely." His eyes glinted. "I think it's time the Morettis learned that the woman they discarded wasn't just a waitress playing dress-up. You are Elena Ashcroft, sole heir to an empire that was old when the Morettis were still running numbers in Brooklyn." Elena felt something cold and sharp unfold in her chest. "You want me to ruin his deal? Ma, I want you to show him what he threw away. What happens after that is entirely up to you." Alexander paused. "But first you need to remember how to be yourself again. The girl who walked away from all this to marry a gangster with pretty eyes. That girl was brave. Stupid, perhaps, but brave. The woman who signed divorce papers tonight and called me instead of begging him to take her back. That woman is stronger than she knows. I want to see what happens when that woman remembers she was born to rule, not to serve." The plane began its descent, and Elena felt her ears pop. 3 weeks, she said. "That's not much time." "It's enough. I've already made calls. Your grandmother's stylist, her jeweler, her personal shopper, they're all waiting. We'll rebuild what you let him tear down." His voice softened. "And Elena, when you walk into that gala, I want you to remember something. You are not going there to beg for his attention or to win him back. You are going there to show him that divorcing you was the biggest mistake of his life. Can you do that?" Elena thought about Serafina's smile as she'd signed the papers, thought about Dante's casual dismissal, his phone more interesting than his wife of 3 years, thought about walking through the rain with 2 suitcases while they celebrated inside their warm mansion. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." "Good girl." Alexander smiled, and it was the kind of smile that probably terrified his competitors. "Welcome home, Elena. Let's remind the world who you really are." The call ended, and Elena set down the tablet just as the plane touched down. Through the window, she could see they weren't at a commercial airport. This was private, small, the kind of place where people with real money landed when they didn't want attention. A car was waiting on the tarmac. Not the sleek vehicle that had picked her up. This was something else entirely. A vintage Rolls-Royce, midnight blue, with chrome that caught the runway lights like liquid silver. James collected her suitcases and opened the car door with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for royalty. "Your grandfather thought you might appreciate your grandmother's car for the drive home." Elena slid into seats that smelled like leather and roses, her grandmother's signature perfume still lingering after all these years. She remembered riding in this car as a child, her grandmother pointing out landmarks, telling her stories about the family, about the empire they'd built, about the difference between having money and having power. "Money," her grandmother had said, "is what you use to buy things. Power is what makes people give you what you want without you having to pay for it at all." The drive took them through roads Elena remembered from childhood, tree-lined streets and neighborhoods where the houses hid behind gates and walls, where privacy was more valuable than ostentation. They passed the country club where she'd learned to play tennis, the private school where she'd studied alongside children whose trust funds had their own trust funds, the park where her grandmother used to take her to feed the swans. And then they turned into a driveway she'd thought she'd never see again. The Ashcroft estate spread across 20 acres of manicured grounds. The main house a masterpiece of old-world architecture that made the Moretti mansion look like a pretender's castle. Lights glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming, and as the car rolled to a stop, the front door opened. Alexander Ashcroft stood on the steps, and even at 75, he looked like a man who could buy and sell kingdoms before breakfast. He wore a cardigan and slacks, casual by his standards, but he carried himself like a general reviewing his troops. Elena stepped out of the car, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then Alexander opened his arms, and Elena found herself running up the steps like she was 10 years old again, falling into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and old books and home. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry I stayed away." "Shh, you're here now. That's all that matters." He held her tight, and Elena felt something in her chest finally break open and release. Not healing, not yet, but the beginning of it. "Come inside. There are people who've been waiting to see you." The house was exactly as she remembered, grand but comfortable, filled with art and antiques that told the story of a family that had been powerful for generations. But tonight, it was also filled with people. Her Aunt Caroline stood in the foyer, elegant in a way that made expensive clothes look cheap by comparison. Beside her, Uncle Thomas, who ran the European operations and looked like he'd stepped out of a British spy film. And others, cousins she hadn't seen in years, family friends who'd known her since childhood, staff who'd watched her grow up and had probably wondered if she'd ever come to her senses. "Elena!" Caroline swept forward, took Elena's face in her hands. "Look at you, thin as a rail and pale as death. When was the last time you ate something that wasn't selected by that awful woman?" "Yesterday, I think. Maybe the day before." "Unacceptable. Thomas, tell the kitchen we need soup. Real soup, not that broth nonsense. And bread. Fresh bread with real butter." Caroline linked her arm through Elena's. "Come. We have a lot to discuss and not much time to do it." They moved into the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace, and someone had already set out tea service. Elena sank into a chair she remembered from childhood, felt the familiar cushions embrace her. 3 weeks, Alexander said, taking his own seat. "That's all we have before the Castellane Gala." "Elena needs to look like she's not only survived the divorce but thrived in it, which means we have work to do." "Hair first," Caroline said, studying Elena like she was a renovation project. "That style, very dutiful wife, very trying to please mother-in-law. We need something bolder, something that says, 'I don't need your approval anymore.'" "Clothes," Thomas added. "Nothing she wore as Mrs. Moretti. Everything new, everything chosen by her, not some stylist trying to make her fit a mold." "Jewelry," Alexander said quietly. "Your grandmother's pieces, the ones I've been keeping for you, the ones that were meant to be yours all along." Elena looked around at her family, at these people who'd loved her even when she'd chosen someone else, who'd sent messages for 3 years that she'd been too stubborn to read, who were now planning to help her walk back into the world that had tried to erase her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I left. I chose him over all of you." "You chose love," Caroline said gently, "or what you thought was love. There's no shame in that." "But I was wrong." "Welcome to being human." Thomas smiled. "We're all wrong about something. The question is what you do after you realize it." Alexander leaned forward. "Elena, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about hurting the Morettis, although I won't pretend that's not a pleasant side benefit. This is about you reclaiming your place in the world. You are my heir. You are the next generation of this family, and it's time everyone remembered that." "I don't know if I can do what you're asking," Elena said quietly. "Walking into that gala, facing Dante, facing all those people who watched me fail." "You didn't fail." Alexander's voice was sharp. "He failed. He had a brilliant, beautiful, strong woman who loved him, and he threw her away because his mother convinced him bloodlines mattered more than character. That's his failure, not yours." "The gala," Caroline said, steering them back. "We need a strategy. Just showing up isn't enough. We need an entrance." "The private jet," Thomas suggested. "Land at the airport next to the venue, arrive by helicopter, make it impossible to miss." "Too flashy," Alexander said. "Elena isn't some starlet seeking attention. She's an Ashcroft. We don't need to announce ourselves loudly. We need to arrive in a way that makes everyone else feel like they've been waiting for us." Caroline's eyes lit up. The vintage rolls, the one her grandmother used, drive right up to the entrance, make them wait while she steps out, slow, deliberate, like she has all the time in the world and they're privileged just to watch. "Better," Alexander agreed. "And inside?" "She needs an escort," Thomas said. "Someone who makes a statement, not a date. That would look desperate. But someone powerful enough that walking in with Elena means something." They all looked at Alexander. He smiled. "I haven't attended the Castellane Gala in 5 years. I think it's time I made an exception. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Her grandfather attending the gala meant more than just showing up with family. It meant the patriarch of the Ashcroft Empire was publicly claiming her, was telling the world that divorcing Elena Moretti meant declaring war on Elena Ashcroft. Grandfather, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He reached over, took her hand. Your grandmother would have loved this. Taking our granddaughter to the social event of the year, watching all those pompous fools realize they've underestimated the wrong woman. She would have worn her best dress and her cruelest smile. Then I'll wear her necklace, Elena said. The sapphire one, the one Dante never knew existed. Caroline's smile was fierce. Perfect. We'll build everything around that. A dress that makes the necklace look like it was made for the gown, not the other way around. Something that says old money so loudly that new money covers its ears. Over the next 3 weeks, Elena was rebuilt from the ground up. The hair came first, shorter, sharper, with subtle highlights that caught the light when she moved. Not the long, carefully maintained waves Serafina had insisted made her look appropriately feminine. This was modern, confident, bold. Then the clothes. Caroline took her to designers who didn't advertise, who didn't have storefronts, who dressed royalty and refused celebrities. Everything was custom. Everything was measured to perfection, and nothing looked like anything Elena had worn as Dante's wife. The jewelry came from her grandmother's collection, pieces that had been worn by women who'd shaped history, who'd sat across from presidents and prime ministers and made them listen. The sapphire necklace alone was worth more than Dante's car collection, but the real transformation happened internally. Alexander spent hours with her, walking the grounds, talking about the family business. Not the criminal enterprise Dante ran, but legitimate power, shipping routes and trade agreements, political connections and financial leverage. The kind of influence that shaped policy without ever making headlines. The Morettis think power comes from fear, Alexander told her one afternoon as they fed the swans in the pond.